They married her off to save the family. He banished her 3 days later. Everyone expected Eliza Harrow to fade into obscurity on that dying estate in the frozen north, just another forgotten wife collecting dust in an empty manor. They were wrong, dead wrong. Because 3 years later, when the powerful Duke Alistair Rowe showed up weak and desperate at her door, begging for help, she wasn't the broken girl he'd thrown away. She was the woman who'd built an empire from nothing. And now? Now she held all the cards. Stay with me until the end to see how this abandoned bride made a duke kneel. Like this video, and comment which city you're watching from. The carriage rattled over frozen ground, each jolt sending pain through Eliza's ribs where the corset dug in too tight. She'd been laced into this wedding dress like a prisoner into chains. White silk that cost more than her family had seen in a year, paid for with money they didn't have, borrowed against a future that hinged entirely on the next few hours going exactly right. "Stop fidgeting," her mother hissed from across the narrow bench. Margaret Harrow's face was painted with rouge that couldn't quite hide how hollow her cheeks had become. "You'll wrinkle the fabric." Eliza's hand stilled in her lap, but her mind raced. Through the frosted window she could see the massive stone walls of Ashford Cathedral rising against the gray November sky. Crowds lined the streets, not to celebrate, but to gawk. Everyone in the north knew what this wedding really was. A transaction, a bailout, a rescue. Her father, Edmund Harrow, had gambled away their estate, their reputation, and very nearly their lives. The debts had piled up like winter snow, silent, suffocating, deadly. Creditors circled like wolves. The family name, once respected across 3 counties, had become a punchline in every tavern from York to Newcastle. Then the Duke had made his offer. Not a proposal. An offer. Clinical. Transactional. He would absorb the Harrow debts, restore a veneer of respectability to the family name, and in exchange, he would get a wife. Any wife. It didn't matter which Harrow daughter. Eliza just happened to be the eldest and therefore the most expedient choice. "Remember," her father said, not looking at her. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, hands gripping his walking stick hard enough to make the wood creak. "You smile. You say the words. You don't embarrass us." "I won't," Eliza said quietly. "You can't afford to." His voice was sharp, edged with something between desperation and rage. "None of us can. If this falls apart, it won't. If it does, we're ruined. Completely. Your mother, your sisters, me, we'll be on the street by Christmas. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what happens to women with no money and no name?" "Edmund," her mother said, voice warning, "she needs to know the stakes." "I know them," Eliza said. She'd known them for months. She'd lain awake every night since the Duke's offer arrived, understanding exactly what was being asked of her, what was being taken, her freedom, her future, her choice. The carriage jerked to a stop. "We're here," the driver called. Eliza's mother reached across and gripped her hand, fingers ice cold. For a moment, something like guilt flickered in her eyes. "You're doing the right thing," she said, but it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. Then the door opened, and there was no more time for doubt. The cathedral was packed. Every pew filled with nobility who'd come to witness the spectacle, the disgraced Harrows marrying into one of the most powerful families in England. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Eliza walked down the aisle. She kept her chin up, eyes forward, even as she caught fragments of conversation. Such a scandal. Heard the father lost it all at cards. Desperate, really, to accept any bride. Wonder how long before he tires of her. At the altar stood Duke Alistair Rowe. Eliza had seen him once before, the day he'd come to finalize the arrangement. He'd barely looked at her then, just nodded curtly when her father presented her, as if inspecting livestock at market. Now as she approached, he still didn't look. His gaze was fixed somewhere over her head, expression carved from granite. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired. Handsome in the way a cliff face is handsome. Imposing, unyielding, dangerous if you got too close. Everything about him radiated power and controlled violence. This was a man who commanded armies, controlled trade routes, moved kingdoms with a word. And he couldn't have looked more disinterested if he'd tried. The priest began the ceremony. Eliza spoke her vows in a voice that didn't shake, even though her hands did. Alistair repeated his own words with all the warmth of a man reading a shipping manifest. I now pronounce you husband and wife. No kiss. Alistair simply turned and walked back down the aisle. Eliza had to gather her skirts and hurry to keep pace. The reception was worse. They sat at the head table like two strangers forced to share a train car. Alistair barely spoke to her, directing all his conversation to the lords and merchants who approached to offer congratulations. When he did address her, it was brief, formal, cold. You'll want to eat something, he said at one point, not looking at her. It's a long journey to Thornfield. Thornfield? She'd heard the name but knew nothing about it. Your new home. Our new home, she corrected quietly. Now he did look at her, and his eyes were like winter stone. No, your new home. I have business in London that will keep me occupied indefinitely. You'll be managing the northern estate. Managing? As if she'd have any real authority. As if this was an opportunity rather than exile. I see, she said. Do you? His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. Let me be clear, Miss Harrow. Duchess Rowe, she said. The title tasted foreign on her tongue, but she'd earned it, or rather, paid for it. His jaw tightened. Duchess. This marriage is a legal arrangement, nothing more. You fulfill your end, bear the title, maintain appearances, stay out of my affairs, and I'll fulfill mine. Your family's debts are cleared. You'll have an allowance, a home. That's more than generous given the circumstances. Given the circumstances, Eliza repeated slowly, of your needing a wife badly enough to marry a woman sight unseen? Those circumstances? Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe that she'd push back. I needed a wife quickly and quietly. You needed your family saved from destitution and scandal. We both got what we needed. That's the extent of our relationship. And if I want more, then you'll be disappointed. He stood abruptly, cutting off further conversation. The toast was called. Speeches were made. Her father's was uncomfortably obsequious, praising the Duke's generosity, carefully avoiding any mention of why that generosity had been necessary. Then it was over. No first dance, no private moment, just a curt instruction from Alistair to his steward to see that the Duchess is prepared for travel before he disappeared into the crowd of lords and merchants. 3 hours later, Eliza stood in a smaller carriage, not the grand affair that had brought her to the wedding, but a practical traveling coach, watching the lights of civilization fade behind her. It's a 2-day journey, Your Grace, the steward said. His name was Mr. Pemberton, and he had the permanently pained expression of a man who'd been given an impossible task and knew it. We'll stop at an inn tonight, then reach Thornfield by tomorrow evening. Tell me about it, Eliza said. Thornfield. Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. It's a work in progress, Your Grace. That's not an answer, he sighed. It's old, very old. The Duke inherited it from a distant uncle 5 years ago, but he's never visited. The estate manager died last winter, and since then, he trailed off meaningfully. Since then, what? Since then, there's been no one managing it properly. The house needs extensive repairs. The tenants are, well, they're managing as best they can, but without direction, things have declined. Eliza stared at him. You're sending me to an abandoned estate? Not abandoned, Your Grace, occupied, certainly, but perhaps neglected. Does my husband know this? The Duke has been informed of the estate's condition, yes, which meant he knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just banishing her, he was dumping her in a place so remote and run down that she'd be completely isolated, out of sight, out of mind. The message couldn't have been clearer if he'd had it tattooed on her forehead. You're an obligation, not a wife. A problem solved, not a partner wanted. That night at the inn, Eliza sat alone in a small room, still wearing her wedding dress because no one had thought to pack her anything else. She stared at her reflection in the tarnished mirror, pale skin, dark hair, eyes that looked too big and too frightened in her thin face. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Growing up, even in their declining circumstances, she'd imagined something different. Not a love match necessarily. She wasn't naive. But at least respect. Partnership. The chance to build something together. Instead, she'd been traded like livestock and shipped off to rot in the countryside. A knock on the door startled her. "Your Grace?" It was Pemberton. "I've brought some traveling clothes for tomorrow. And this." He handed her a letter, sealed with the Duke's crest. Eliza waited until he left before breaking the seal. The message inside was brief. "You are to manage Thornfield as you see fit. Make it profitable if you can. If you cannot, do not bother me with complaints. You will receive a quarterly allowance sufficient for basic needs. Any additional funds must be earned through the estate's operations. I do not expect to visit. Do not expect me. A. Rowe." No dear wife. No signature beyond an initial, not even a full name. Eliza read it 3 times, feeling something cold and hard settling in her chest where fear and humiliation had been. This wasn't just rejection, it was contempt. He'd made her his wife in name only, then thrown her away like a broken tool. Fine. She set the letter down carefully, precisely, as if it might explode if handled roughly. Fine. If he wanted her gone, she'd be gone. If he wanted her to manage his forgotten estate, she'd manage it. And if he thought she'd simply fade into obscurity, grateful for his scraps and his allowance, he didn't know her at all. The next day, as the carriage climbed into the moors, the landscape turned increasingly bleak. Rolling hills covered in dead grass, stone walls crumbling into ruin, skeletal trees bent by constant wind, the sky pressed down like a lead weight, gray and threatening. "There," Pemberton said, pointing. "Thornfield Manor." Eliza's first thought was that it looked like something from a ghost story. The manor house rose from the landscape like a broken tooth. Dark stone, narrow windows, half the roof covered in moss. The grounds around it were overgrown, the gardens choked with weeds. Several outbuildings stood empty and doorless. This wasn't a home. It was a tomb. "How many staff?" Eliza asked, voice flat. "Currently? A cook, 2 housemaids, and a groundskeeper, plus 3 tenant families on the land." "That's all?" "Most left when the wages stopped coming regularly. The Duke's steward in London sends funds quarterly, but—" He trailed off again. "But they're not enough, and they arrive late, and no one here has the authority to do anything about it." Eliza finished. Pemberton nodded miserably. The carriage stopped in front of the main entrance. Eliza stepped down onto gravel so overgrown with weeds it was barely visible. The front door, massive oak studded with iron, was closed. No one had come out to greet them. "Mrs. Davison," Pemberton called. "The Duchess has arrived." A long moment passed. Then the door creaked open, revealing a stout woman in her 50s with flour on her apron and suspicion in her eyes. "You're the Duke's new wife?" she asked, looking Eliza up and down with clear skepticism. "I am," Eliza said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You're Mrs. Davison?" "Cook and housekeeper both, seeing as there's no one else to do it." She didn't move from the doorway. "You planning to stay long?" "I live here now." Mrs. Davison stepped aside finally, but the look she gave Eliza said clearly, "We'll see about that." The interior was worse than the exterior. The entrance hall was vast and freezing, the fire in the great hearth barely more than embers. Portraits lined the walls, generations of rows staring down with varying degrees of disapproval. Dust covered every surface. "The master bedroom is upstairs," Mrs. Davison said, already turning away. "I'll have Annie bring up water for washing. Supper's at 6, if you want it." "Wait," Eliza said. "I'd like to tour the house and the grounds. I'd like to meet the staff and the tenants." Mrs. Davison paused. "Today?" "Today." "You just arrived." "I'm aware." Eliza met her eyes steadily. "I'm also aware that this estate has been neglected for years. I'd like to understand what I'm working with." Something shifted in Mrs. Davison's expression, not warmth exactly, but a kind of grudging recognition. "You're not what I expected. No one ever is. Now, the tour?" What Eliza saw over the next 3 hours confirmed her worst fears and then exceeded them. The manor itself was structurally sound but desperately needed repairs. Half the chimneys were blocked. Windows were cracked. The library, which should have been magnificent, was locked because part of the ceiling had collapsed. The servants' quarters were cramped and cold. Outside was worse. The gardens were dead. The stables housed two ancient horses and smelled like the roof leaked. The tenant cottages were barely standing, patched with whatever materials the families could scavenge. And the people, the few who remained, looked at Eliza with a mixture of hope and cynicism that cut deeper than open hostility would have. "The Duke sent you to fix this?" one of the tenant farmers, a man named Thomas Beckett, asked. He was lean and weathered, with hands scarred from work. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but you look like a stiff wind would knock you over." "Probably would," Eliza admitted. "That doesn't change the fact that I'm here, and this needs fixing." "With what money? With what authority? You're just a girl." "I'm the Duchess of Thornfield," Eliza said, surprised by how steady her voice came out. "And whether I'm a girl or not, I'm also the only person here who has direct access to the Duke's steward in London. I can request funds. I can make decisions. Unless you prefer to keep struggling on your own?" Beckett stared at her for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "We'll see if you last the winter." Everyone kept saying that. "We'll see. We'll see if you last. We'll see if you mean it," as if she was temporary. As if she'd give up and leave, like everyone expected. That night, alone in a bedroom so cold she could see her breath, Eliza sat at a writing desk and made a list by candlelight. Immediate needs. Repair the roof on the eastern wing before snow. Clear the chimneys. Fix the well pump. Get proper winter supplies for the tenants. Long-term projects. Restore the gardens. Rebuild the tenant cottages. Establish proper estate management. Make the land profitable again. Problems. No money. No staff. No authority beyond a title no one respects. A husband who doesn't care if I live or die. She stared at that last line for a long time. Then she picked up her pen and added one more item. Solution. Prove them all wrong. Simple. Impossible. Necessary. Outside, the wind howled across the moors like a living thing. The house creaked and groaned. Somewhere, a shutter banged loose. Eliza didn't sleep. She sat at that desk until dawn writing letters, to the Duke's steward demanding an emergency disbursement, to the village requesting suppliers, to solicitors inquiring about estate law and her rights as Duchess. When Mrs. Davison found her in the morning, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by sealed envelopes, the older woman's expression shifted from skepticism to something almost like respect. "You're really going to try this," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. They're going to eat you alive. Let them try." Eliza stood, her back aching, her head pounding, her hands cramped from hours of writing. "I need you to help me understand how this estate actually works. The real operations, not just what's on paper. And I need you to be honest about what's possible and what isn't." Mrs. Davison studied her. "Why?" "Because I have nowhere else to go," Eliza said simply. "Because my husband made it clear I'm on my own. Because everyone expects me to fail. And because—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Because I'm tired of being the thing that happens to. I want to be the thing that happens." A smile ghosted across Mrs. Davison's face, the first genuine warmth Eliza had seen from anyone since the wedding. "All right then, Your Grace," she said. "Let's see what you're made of." The first real test came 2 weeks later, when the snow started. Not the gentle, picturesque snow of Christmas cards. This was northern moorland snow, driven sideways by wind that cut through wool like it was paper. It piled against doors, buried fences, turned the already treacherous roads into death traps. And the eastern wing roof, the one Eliza had flagged as urgent, started leaking in 3 places. "I told you," Mrs. Davison said not unkindly, as they stood in what had once been a guest bedroom watching water drip steadily into a rusted bucket. "This house has been dying for years. You can't fix that in 2 weeks." "I requested emergency funds from London," Eliza said, watching another drop fall. "They should have arrived by now." "Should have." Mrs. Davison's tone made it clear what she thought about should-haves and London promises. The funds didn't come that week, or the next. Meanwhile, the temperature dropped. The ancient boiler that heated the manor, barely, gave up entirely on a Tuesday morning. Eliza woke to find ice on the inside of her bedroom window, and Annie, one of the housemaids, crying in the kitchen because her hands were too cold to work. We're going to freeze, Annie said, tears streaming down her red, chapped face. She was barely 18, thin as a rail, terrified. We're all going to freeze and nobody cares. I care, Eliza said. You're just one person. You can't fight winter. Maybe not, but she could get creative. Thomas Beckett, Eliza said, finding the tenant farmer in his cottage that afternoon. Snow had drifted 3 feet high outside his door. You said the old heating system ran on coal, correct? When there was coal to burn, yes. He was feeding a tiny fire made from what looked like furniture scraps. His wife and 2 children huddled nearby, wrapped in every blanket they owned. But coal costs money we don't have. The western forest, Eliza said. The one past the tenant fields. Who owns that? Beckett frowned. The estate does. Why? Because timber burns, and we have hundreds of acres of it. You can't just cut down the Duke's forest, Beckett said, looking at her like she'd suggested burning down the manor itself. That's theft, destruction of property. You could be arrested. I'm the Duchess. It's my property as much as his, and everyone here is going to die if we don't get heat. Eliza met his eyes. Help me or don't, but I'm doing this. She watched him wrestle with it, duty versus survival, rules versus reality. Finally, he stood. I'll get my axe. By nightfall, 6 tenant men were in the forest with Eliza, cutting timber by lantern light. It was brutal work. The temperature was well below freezing. Snow kept falling. Eliza's hands, unused to physical labor, blistered within an hour. By hour 2, they were bleeding. Your Grace, one of the younger farmers, a man named Peter, said nervously, maybe you should go back. Let us handle this. I'm not leaving. You're hurt. So are you. We're all hurt. We keep working. They did. By dawn, they'd felled and hauled enough timber to keep the manor and all 3 tenant cottages heated for a month. Eliza's dress was ruined, her hands wrapped in torn strips of her petticoat, her hair wild with twigs and snow. She looked like a madwoman. She'd never felt more awake in her life. Mrs. Davison, she said, stumbling into the kitchen as the sun rose. We need hot water and bandages and food for the men who worked through the night. The cook stared at her. What did you do? What needed doing? Word spread fast. By afternoon, the entire remaining population of Thornfield, all 12 adults and 5 children, knew what had happened. Reactions were mixed. She's going to get us all in trouble, one of the tenant wives, Margaret Fletcher, said loudly enough for Eliza to hear. Cutting down the Duke's timber without permission? When he finds out, he won't care, Eliza interrupted. He hasn't visited in 5 years. He doesn't know what's here and doesn't want to. But if you'd rather follow the rules and freeze to death, that's your choice. Margaret's face flushed. You think you're so clever, don't you? Coming here with your fancy title, acting like you know what we need. I know we need heat. I know we need food. I know we need this place to actually function, or we're all going to starve or freeze or both. If you have better ideas, I'm listening. Silence. Margaret looked away, but Thomas Beckett was nodding slowly, and so were a few others. Not trust, not yet, but something. Recognition, maybe. That she wasn't just talking, she was doing. The steward's letter arrived 3 days later, no emergency funds. Instead, a curt note explaining that the Duke's accountant required additional documentation before dispersing extra money, and would she please submit detailed expense reports, including... Eliza stopped reading and threw the letter into the fire. No money then, Mrs. Davison said, watching the paper curl and blacken. No money. So what now? Good question. Eliza had exactly 43 pounds to her name, the remains of the generous allowance Alistair had mentioned. At current spending rates, that would last perhaps 2 months. After that? She looked around the kitchen. It was the warmest room in the manor now, thanks to the timber they'd cut. Mrs. Davison was making bread. Annie was mending a shirt. Outside the window, snow fell steadily, burying the world. Now, Eliza said slowly, we figure out how to make this place earn its keep. It's a dying estate in the middle of nowhere, Mrs. Davison said flatly. What exactly do you think it can earn? Eliza didn't know. Not yet. But that night, she went through every room in the manor, notebook in hand, cataloging everything. Furniture, artwork, books, random objects gathering dust. Most of it was worthless or too damaged to sell. But in a locked room on the third floor, she found something interesting. Bolts of fabric, dozens of them, stacked to the ceiling, silk, wool, linen, velvet. Some moth-eaten, some water-damaged, but many still usable. "What is this?" she asked Mrs. Davison. "The late Duchess's hobby. She was going to start a textile business, I heard. Died before she could. That fabric's been sitting there for 20 years. It's still good?" "Some of it. Why?" "Because fabric was valuable. Because people needed clothes, blankets, household goods. Because the nearest market town was only 15 miles away, if you were willing to brave the roads." "How many people in the tenant families know how to sew?" Eliza asked. Mrs. Davison blinked. "All the women do. It's how they keep their families clothed. Why?" "Because," Eliza said, already running calculations in her head, "we're going to start a business." The idea was simple, possibly insane, and definitely desperate. Turn Thornfield's forgotten textile stock into saleable goods. Commission the tenant women to sew, split the profits, use the money to buy supplies and fund repairs. The execution was harder. "You want us to work for you?" Margaret Fletcher said when Eliza proposed it. They were gathered in Thomas Beckett's cottage, all three tenant families, plus Mrs. Davison and the manor staff. "Like servants?" "Like partners," Eliza corrected. "You do the work because you have the skills I don't. I handle the business side, sales, supplies, accounts. We split the profits 70-30. 70% to you, 70 to you, divided among the families who participate, 30 to the estate for operating costs and materials." Shocked silence. "That's..." Thomas Beckett's wife, Sarah, spoke up. She was a quiet woman usually, but her voice was sharp now. "That's backwards. You're the Duchess. You own the materials, the manor, the land. You could take everything and we'd have no say." "I could," Eliza agreed. "I won't. This only works if you actually make money from it. Otherwise, why would you bother?" "Why would you?" Margaret challenged. "What's in it for you?" "Survival," Eliza said simply. "Mine and yours both. This estate is dying. If we don't find a way to make it sustainable, we're all finished. But if we work together, if we actually build something, then maybe we have a chance." She saw them looking at each other, silent conversations passing between husbands and wives. These were people who'd been abandoned by their landlord, ignored by the world, left to rot on the edges of civilization. They had no reason to trust her, except she was offering them something no one else had: respect and a real stake in their own survival. "I'm in," Sarah Beckett said quietly. Her husband nodded. "So am I." One by one, the others agreed. Even Margaret, though she still looked suspicious. The work started immediately. The women cleared out a large room on the manor's ground floor, setting up workstations. They sorted through the fabric, discarding what was too damaged, saving what could be used. Eliza, who'd never touched a sewing machine in her life, learned by watching and asking questions. "You're going to ruin that," Sarah said, not unkindly, as Eliza struggled with a simple hem. "Probably. Show me how not to." It took 3 weeks to produce their first batch of goods. Practical items like blankets, work shirts, sturdy dresses. Nothing fancy, but well-made and desperately needed by people in the surrounding villages who couldn't afford London prices. "Now comes the hard part," Eliza said, loading everything into the cart. "Selling it." "You're going to market alone?" Mrs. Davison asked. "Thomas is coming with me. Someone needs to drive." "Your Grace, with respect, you're a duchess. You can't just show up at a village market hawking goods like a common peddler." "Watch me." The market at Millbrook was chaos. Farmers selling livestock, women selling preserves, merchants shouting about tools and trinkets. Eliza sat up at the edge, Thomas helping her arrange the goods on a rickety table they'd borrowed. And then? Nothing. People walked past. A few glanced at the table. None stopped. "It's because they know you're from the estate," Thomas said after an hour of brutal silence. "Thornfield's got a reputation. Nobody wants anything to do with it." "What kind of reputation?" "Cursed. Haunted. Pick your story. The last 3 families who tried to make a go of it failed. The Duke who owned it before your husband went mad, supposedly. People think the place is poisoned. That's ridiculous. Is it? Thomas gestured at the empty landscape around them. Look where it is. Middle of nowhere. No crops will grow in that soil. The previous tenants all left or died. Can you blame people for being superstitious? Eliza couldn't, but she also couldn't afford to accept it. A woman approached the table, middle-aged, tired-looking, examining one of the wool blankets. How much? She asked. Eliza named a price, carefully calculated to be lower than London goods, but high enough to make a profit. The woman snorted. For Thornfield work? I'll give you half that. This is quality work, Eliza said, keeping her voice even. Look at the stitching, the fabric. This will last you 10 winters. If it doesn't fall apart first. But the woman was running her hands over the blanket, and Eliza could see her wavering. Buy it or don't, Eliza said. But you won't find better for the price anywhere in 3 counties. The woman bought it. Then 2 more people stopped. Then 5. By late afternoon, they'd sold half their stock. Not bad for cursed goods, Thomas said on the drive back, counting money. Not bad, Eliza agreed. But she was already thinking about the next batch, the next market, the next step. They kept going. Week after week, month after month. The textile operation grew. They added more products, curtains, tablecloths, children's clothes. Eliza learned which markets were worth traveling to, which merchants would buy wholesale, how to negotiate without getting cheated. She also learned how to handle the local toughs who tried to rob them on the road back from market. That education came hard and fast one snowy evening when 3 men stepped out of the trees, knives visible. Heard you've been doing good business, their leader said. We'll take those earnings, if you don't mind. I do mind, Eliza said. The man laughed. Listen to her. Give us the money, Your Grace, and we'll let you go. Eliza looked at Thomas, who'd gone pale. She looked at the money box on the seat between them. 3 months of hard work, the estate's survival, everyone's hope. She picked up the shotgun Thomas kept under the driver's seat. Leave, she said, or I'll shoot. You won't. She fired into the air. The blast was deafening. The horses screamed and reared. The 3 men scattered into the trees like startled birds. Drive, Eliza said, hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped the gun. Drive now. They made it back to Thornfield, barely. When Thomas helped her down from the cart, she nearly fell. Adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her sick and shaking. You could have gotten us killed, Thomas said. They could have gotten us killed. I just made sure they didn't. Word of that incident spread too. Suddenly, Duchess Eliza wasn't just the strange woman trying to save the cursed estate. She was the one who'd faced down robbers with a shotgun. Respect, grudging and uncertain, started to filter in. But respect didn't fix the roof, or replace the rotted floorboards in the eastern wing, or pay for proper tools and seeds for spring planting. 6 months in, Eliza sat in the study, now her office, going over the books. They were making money. Not much, but enough to keep everyone fed and warm, enough to make small repairs, not enough to truly restore the estate. We need more income, she said to Mrs. Davison. The textile work is helping, but it's not enough. What else is there? The land's no good for farming. We've got no livestock worth selling. The manor's falling apart. The manor, Eliza said slowly. She looked up at the study walls, good bones despite the decay. Large windows, high ceilings. What if we didn't live in all of it? What? Most of the rooms are empty. We're 12 people trying to heat and maintain a building designed for 50. What if we closed off sections, rented them out? To who? Nobody wants to come to Thornfield. Merchants traveling north need places to stop. Traders need storage. Families need housing. Eliza was thinking out loud now. We're on the main road to Scotland. We're remote enough that people can conduct business privately. That's valuable. It took weeks to make the eastern wing habitable enough for renters. They worked themselves raw, Eliza, the staff, the tenants, everyone. Cleaning, repairing, painting, furnishing rooms with whatever they could salvage or buy cheap. Their first tenant was a wool merchant named Harrison, traveling to Edinburgh with goods to sell. He needed a week's lodging and a secure place for his stock. It's not much, Eliza admitted, showing him the rooms. But it's warm, the food is good, and your goods will be safe. Harrison looked around skeptically. Then he named a price, half what Eliza had hoped for. Done, she said anyway, because half was better than nothing, and nothing was what they'd had before. That winter was brutal, worse than the first. Snow measured in feet, not inches. Temperatures that killed livestock and made even short trips life-threatening. 2 of the tenant children got sick, bad sick, fever and coughing that wouldn't stop. "We need a doctor," Sarah Beckett said, frantic. "They need medicine." "The nearest doctor is in Millbrook," Eliza said. "That's 15 miles in this weather." "Then what do we do?" Eliza didn't have an answer. But Mrs. Davison did. Old remedies, herbal preparations, treatments passed down through generations. They worked through the night, all the women together, steaming kettles and brewing teas and keeping the children warm. Both children survived. Barely. "You saved them," Sarah said afterward, exhausted. "All of you." "We saved them," Eliza corrected. "Together." It was true. Because somewhere in the grinding months of survival, they'd stopped being landlord and tenants, duchess and servants. They'd become something else. A community. A unit. People who depended on each other because they had no one else. By the end of the first year, Thornfield was still a wreck, but a functioning wreck. The textile business brought in steady money. The rental rooms occasionally filled. The tenants were producing enough to feed themselves and sell surplus at market. "We're not dying anymore," Thomas said one evening, reviewing the accounts with Eliza. "That's something." "Is it enough?" "For now, yes. For long term? No." He met her eyes. "You know that, don't you? We're surviving, but we're not thriving. One bad harvest, one bad winter, one piece of terrible luck. We could still lose everything." Eliza knew, but knowing and accepting were different things. The second year brought new challenges. A dispute with a neighboring landowner over water rights that nearly turned violent. A fire in one of the tenant cottages that destroyed half their possessions. Equipment failures, bad weather, a merchant who tried to cheat them on payment and had to be legally pursued. Through it all, Eliza kept working. She learned estate law by candlelight. She negotiated contracts with suppliers. She mediated disputes. She made decisions, some good, some disastrous, and lived with the consequences. She also changed. The soft, uncertain girl who'd arrived in a wedding dress was gone. In her place, someone harder, leaner. A woman who could swing an axe, fire a shotgun, stare down a hostile merchant, and calculate crop yields in her head. Someone whose hands were permanently calloused, whose face had been burned brown by sun and wind, whose dresses were patched and practical. Someone who belonged to this harsh place in a way she'd never belonged anywhere before. "You're different," Mrs. Davison said one evening. They were in the kitchen, just the two of them, preparing food for tomorrow. "From when you first arrived." "I'd hope so. I was useless then." "You weren't useless. You were scared. Now you're not." Eliza considered that. "I'm still scared. I'm just better at working through it." "The Duke wouldn't recognize you." "Good," Eliza said. Then more quietly, "Has there been any word from him?" "Not in 18 months. Not since that first letter." 18 months. A year and a half of silence. Eliza told herself she didn't care. She'd built a life here without him. She didn't need his approval, his presence, his anything. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered what he'd think if he could see what she'd done. Would he be impressed? Dismissive? Would he even notice? The third year was when things started to truly turn around. The textile business expanded. They hired 3 more women from neighboring villages. The rental rooms stayed consistently occupied. Eliza negotiated a contract to supply blankets to the army garrison at York. Bulk orders, steady income, real money. With those funds, they finally fixed the roof. Properly. Then the boiler. Then the tenant cottages. They bought livestock, sheep initially, then cattle. The land, which Thomas had insisted was too poor for crops, proved surprisingly good for grazing. "We're going to be all right," Sarah said one spring morning, watching the sheep in the fields. Actually all right. Eliza wanted to believe her, but she'd learned to be cautious, to expect disaster, to know that just when things seemed stable, the ground could shift beneath you. She was right to be cautious. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in late summer, 3 years and 4 months after she'd been exiled to Thornfield. It wasn't from the steward, it was from London, from the Duke's physician. The Duke has taken gravely ill. His condition is serious. You should prepare yourself for the possibility of his death. Eliza read it 3 times, standing in her office, watching dust motes drift through afternoon sunlight. The Duke, Alistair. The man who'd married her and thrown her away. The man who'd abandoned her to die or succeed on her own. The man she hadn't seen or heard from in over 3 years. He was dying. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Davison's voice came from the doorway. "What is it?" "It's my husband," Eliza said. The words felt strange. "He's dying." Mrs. Davison came in, read the letter, swore quietly. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." "You could go to London, see him." "Why would I do that? He made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me. He's still your husband, and if he dies—" Mrs. Davison trailed off, but the implications hung heavy in the air. If he died, Eliza's position changed. Widow of a duke versus wife of a duke. Different legal standing, different rights, different everything. The estate, which currently belonged to Alistair, would pass to his heir. Which was who? She realized she didn't even know if he had family. Brothers, cousins, anyone. "I should stay here," Eliza said. "Thornfield needs me." "Thornfield will survive a few weeks without you. We know how to run this place now. You taught us." That was true. But it wasn't really about Thornfield, was it? It was about facing Alistair again, facing the man who'd shaped her life through absence, who'd forced her to become strong by leaving her no other choice. The man she'd spent 3 years simultaneously hating and trying to prove wrong. "I need to think," Eliza said. She spent that night walking the grounds, the gardens she'd restored, the fields now productive, the manor slowly being brought back from ruin. 3 years of brutal work, 3 years of transformation, not just of the estate, but of herself. Was she ready to see him again? Was she ready to face what he'd made her become? The decision came at dawn, watching the sun rise over the moors, those same moors that had seemed so bleak and hostile when she'd first arrived. Now they felt like home. "Mrs. Davison," she said, finding the cook in the kitchen. "I'm going to London." "You're sure?" "No, but I'm going anyway. Pack light. I'll take the fast carriage. Thomas can drive. And—" She paused. "Make sure everyone knows the estate operations continue as normal. I'll be back within 2 weeks. And if the Duke dies while you're there, then I'll deal with that too." The journey to London took 3 days of hard travel. Eliza used the time to prepare herself, mentally reviewing everything that had happened, everything she'd built, everything she'd become. She was not the girl Alistair had married. She was not the woman he'd exiled. She was Duchess Eliza Harrow Rowe, who'd turned a dying estate into a functioning operation, who'd faced down robbers, survived brutal winters, built a business from nothing, who'd earned the respect of people who'd had no reason to give it. Whatever awaited her in London, reconciliation, confrontation, or simply watching her husband die, she would face it as that woman. Not as the abandoned bride he'd discarded. The city was overwhelming after 3 years in the countryside. The noise, the crowds, the sheer press of humanity. Thomas navigated the streets to the Duke's London residence, a massive townhouse in Mayfair that made Thornfield look like a cottage. A butler answered the door, pristine, formal, looking at Eliza like she was something the cat dragged in. "I'm here to see the Duke," she said. "I'm his wife." The butler's expression barely changed, but she caught the flicker of surprise. "The Duchess. Of course. This way, please." He led her through corridors that screamed wealth, marble, mahogany, paintings worth more than entire villages, up a grand staircase, down a hallway lined with doors, to the last room on the left. "The Duke is very weak," the butler said quietly. "He may not know you. The fever has been difficult." "I understand." He opened the door. The room was dark, curtains drawn, lit only by a single lamp. The bed was massive, and in it, nearly lost in blankets, was Alistair. Eliza's first thought was that they'd brought her to the wrong room. The man in that bed couldn't possibly be the Duke she remembered, strong, cold, commanding. This man was wasted, fever-flushed, barely conscious. "Alistair," she said quietly. His eyes opened. For a moment they were unfocused. Then they found her face, and something like shock crossed his features. "Eliza?" His voice was a rasp. "You came. I received word you were ill." "I'm dying." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "The doctors are polite about it, but that's the truth." She moved closer, studying him. 3 years had changed her, but they'd changed him too. He looked older, harder, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical illness. "Why did you send for me?" she asked. "I didn't. My physician did. On his own initiative." Alistair's mouth twisted. "But I'm glad he did. There are things I need to say." "After 3 years of silence?" "Yes." Eliza pulled a chair to the bedside, sat down. "I'm listening." And then Alistair started talking, and everything Eliza thought she knew about her marriage, her exile, her entire life at Thornfield shifted beneath her feet like sand. "I was engaged before I met you," Alistair said, and Eliza felt the words hit like a physical blow. "To a woman named Catherine Thornbridge. We were to be married within the month when I discovered she'd been having an affair with my younger brother, Richard." Eliza sat very still, hands folded in her lap, watching his face. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the ceiling, jaw tight, like the confession was being dragged out of him against his will. "They'd been carrying on for nearly a year, behind my back, making me a fool. When I confronted them, Catherine laughed. Actually laughed. Said I was boring, that Richard understood her in ways I never could. That she'd only agreed to marry me for the title and money." He paused, breathing hard. "Richard didn't even try to deny it. He just stood there, smug, waiting to see what I'd do." "What did you do?" Eliza asked quietly. "I cut them both off. Financially, socially, completely. Richard fled to the continent. Catherine married some minor lord and faded into obscurity, and I swore I'd never be that vulnerable again." His eyes finally met hers. "Then your father approached me with his proposition. A marriage of convenience. No love, no emotion, no possibility of betrayal, because there'd be nothing to betray. It seemed safe. So you married me to protect yourself," Eliza said. Her voice came out flat, controlled. Inside she was shaking. "I married you because you were a transaction, a solution to your family's problem, and a way for me to appear settled without actually risking anything." He shifted in the bed, wincing. "And then on our wedding day, I looked at you, really looked at you, and I saw something that terrified me." "What?" "Hope. You had hope in your eyes, like you thought maybe this could be something real." His laugh was bitter. "I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand the idea that I might disappoint you, or worse, that I might start to care and then be betrayed again. So I sent you away, as far as I could, where I wouldn't have to see you or think about you or risk feeling anything at all." Eliza absorbed this slowly. 3 years of exile, 3 years of brutal survival, 3 years of transformation, all because this man had been too damaged and cowardly to face his own emotions. "You destroyed my life," she said, "because you were afraid." "Yes. You left me to rot in a crumbling estate with no resources, no support, no warning about what I'd be facing, because you couldn't handle your own feelings." "Yes." She wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, wanted to walk out and never look back, but there was more in his expression, something beyond confession, something like desperation. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because I'm dying, and because I need you to know that what happened wasn't your fault. You did nothing wrong. The cruelty was mine." He reached out, hand trembling, not quite touching her. "And because I need to give you something I should have given you 3 years ago." "What's that?" "A choice." He pulled his hand back, exhausted by even that small movement. "I've had my solicitor draw up 3 sets of documents. You can choose any one of them." "I don't understand." "The first grants you a full divorce. You walk away with a substantial settlement, enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. You'd be free of me, free of this marriage, free of everything." Eliza's breath caught. Divorce. Freedom. everything she should want. The second, Alistair continued, grants you independent control of Thornfield and a guaranteed income. We remain married in name only. You never have to see me again, but you'd have legal protection and resources. Security without obligation. And the third? The third? He looked away. The third is an option to stay married, truly married, to give me a chance to be the husband I should have been from the start. No guarantees, no promises I can keep, but if you wanted to try. His voice broke. If you could possibly forgive me enough to try. Stop, Eliza said. Her head was spinning. Just stop. I know it's too much. I know I have no right to ask. You have no right to any of this. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. London sprawled below, gray and endless. You threw me away. You left me to die or succeed completely alone. Do you have any idea what that was like? No, but I'd like to know. Would you? She turned on him. Would you really like to hear about the first winter when we nearly froze to death because there was no heat and no money for coal? Or the time I had to hold a shotgun on robbers because we were carrying 3 months of earnings? Or the nights I sat up terrified that everything would fall apart and everyone depending on me would suffer? Yes, he said simply. I want to know all of it. Why? So you can feel guilty? So you can tell yourself you're sorry and that makes it better? So I can understand what you became when I wasn't there to see it. That stopped her. She stared at him, this dying man who'd shaped her life through absence, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not forgiveness. Something else. Something more complicated. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. You're dying. What kind of chance is there? Maybe none. The doctors give me weeks, possibly months, but however long I have, I'd like to spend it trying to know the woman I married, the woman I threw away. His eyes were desperate now. Please, even if you choose divorce or separation after, even if you hate me forever, just give me a few weeks to try. Eliza wanted to say no. Wanted to walk out of this room, take the divorce papers, and never think about Alistair Rowe again. She'd built a life without him. She didn't need him, but she couldn't quite bring herself to leave. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, take whatever you need. She left the room, walked through that obscenely wealthy townhouse, and found Thomas waiting with the carriage outside. Back to Thornfield, Your Grace? He asked. No, find us an inn. Somewhere quiet. I need to think. They found a small place near the docks. Nothing fancy, but clean and anonymous. Eliza spent the night staring at the ceiling, wrestling with impossible choices. Divorce meant freedom, but it also meant abandoning everything she'd built at Thornfield, because without the marriage, she had no legal claim to the estate. It would pass to whoever inherited Alistair's title, and she'd be thrown out. Independent control meant security. She could keep Thornfield, keep working, keep the life she'd built. But she'd also be tied forever to a dead marriage, unable to move forward. Staying married meant risk, meant potentially caring about a man who'd already proven he could destroy her, meant vulnerability she'd spent 3 years learning to avoid. All 3 options were terrible in different ways. By dawn, she still hadn't decided, but she had questions. I need to speak with your solicitor, she told Alistair when she returned the next morning, and your physician, and anyone else who can tell me exactly what your situation is. If he was surprised by her tactical approach, he didn't show it. Of course, the solicitor, a precise man named Pembroke, laid out the details. If His Grace dies without an heir, the dukedom passes to his cousin, Lord Edmund Rowe. Lord Edmund is not a kind man. He would almost certainly dissolve any arrangements made for you and sell Thornfield immediately. And if I'm still married when he dies? Then you have widow's rights, a substantial income, properties held in trust, legal protections. You'd be secure, but no control over the estate itself. Not unless His Grace changes his will, which he can certainly do. But widow's rights alone would provide for you comfortably. The physician was even more blunt. His Grace has perhaps 6 weeks, maybe 8 if he's lucky. The fever is consuming him. There's nothing more we can do except keep him comfortable. 6 weeks. Not even 2 months. Eliza sat in the townhouse library, surrounded by wealth she'd never asked for, contemplating a future that hinged on choosing between bad options. "You're still here," Alistair said from the doorway. He was leaning heavily on a cane, clearly shouldn't be out of bed, but his eyes were sharp. "I'm still deciding." "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The dark humor in his voice was unexpected. "How can you joke about dying? What else is there to do? Rage against it? Beg?" He made his way to a chair, moving like every step hurt. "I'm dying, Eliza. That's the reality. But I'd rather spend whatever time I have left actually living than drowning in self-pity." She studied him. "Tell me about Richard, your brother." "Why?" "Because if I'm going to make a decision about us, I need to understand what happened to you." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Richard was always the charming one. Easy smiles, easy lies. People loved him. I was the serious one, the responsible one, the one who managed the estates and handled the business while he spent money and charmed society. You resented him." "I resented that I had to be the adult while he got to play, but I still loved him. He was my brother." Alistair's hands tightened on the cane. "When I found out about Catherine, it wasn't just betrayal. It was losing both of them at once. The woman I'd planned to marry and the brother I'd protected my whole life." "So you decided never to trust anyone again?" "Essentially. That's a lonely way to live." "It was, but it felt safer than the alternative." He met her eyes. "Until you showed up at my door yesterday and I realized I'd spent 3 years being completely alone by choice, and it hadn't protected me from anything. It just made me miserable." "I was alone too," Eliza said quietly. "You made sure of that." "I know. And I can't undo it. But I can give you what I should have given from the start. Respect. Honesty. A real partnership if you'll have it. For 6 weeks. For however long I have." Eliza stood, pacing the library. Every book here probably cost more than Thornfield's entire annual income. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every pointless decorative object, vast wealth that Alistair had, that he'd kept from her, while she'd scraped and fought for scraps. "I rebuilt your estate," she said suddenly. "Thornfield. It was dying when you sent me there. No staff, no income, no hope. Do you want to know what I did?" "Yes." She told him. Everything. The timber she'd cut illegally to survive the first winter. The textile business she'd started with nothing but old fabric and desperate women. The fights with neighboring landowners, the robberies, the near disasters, the slow, brutal transformation of a dying estate into something functional. "We're making money now," she said. "Not much, but steady. The tenant families are stable. The manor is being repaired. In another 5 years, it could actually be profitable." Alistair was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. "You did all that? Alone?" "Not alone, with the people you abandoned, but I led it, yes." "That's remarkable." "It was necessary." She turned to face him fully. "And here's what you need to understand. I am not the girl you married. I'm not soft or hopeful or naive. I'm the woman who survived your cruelty and turned it into strength. If you want any kind of relationship with me, even for 6 weeks, you need to respect that." "I do. I swear to you, I do." "Then prove it." She made her decision suddenly, recklessly, driven by something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but might be a kind of angry courage. "I'll stay, for now, but on my terms." "Name them." "First, you change your will. Thornfield goes to me outright, regardless of what happens, not in trust, not conditionally, mine, to do with as I see fit." "Done. What else?" "Second, you give me full control of all estate finances, every property, every investment, every account. I want to see exactly what you've been hiding while I was starving in the north." He flinched at that, but nodded. "Agreed." "Third, you tell me everything. No more secrets, no more lies, no more convenient omissions. If we're doing this, we do it honestly or not at all." "Yes." "And fourth," she stepped closer, making sure he was looking directly at her, "you never, ever make decisions about my life without asking me first. I am not a pawn. I am not a problem to be solved. I am your equal, or I am nothing to you. Understood? Understood. She held his gaze, searching for deception, for manipulation, for any sign this was another trap. But all she saw was a dying man who'd finally run out of walls to hide behind. All right then, she said. Show me what you've been doing for 3 years while I was building your empire. The revelations came fast over the next few days. Alistair's business interests were vast: shipping, textiles, property, investments across Europe. The wealth was staggering, and he'd been working himself into the ground managing all of it, apparently trying to bury his guilt under endless labor. You could have sent money, Eliza said, going through ledgers in his study. Anytime in 3 years, you could have sent proper funding for Thornfield. I know. But you didn't. Why? Because I'm a coward. He said it simply, without excuse. I told myself you were fine, that you'd manage, that checking on you would be weakness. The truth is, I was terrified of what I'd find. Either that you'd failed and I'd have to face what I'd done to you, or that you'd succeeded and I'd have to face what I'd thrown away. So you buried your head and pretended I didn't exist. Yes. She wanted to stay angry. It would be easier, cleaner, but the anger was complicated now by the knowledge that he'd been suffering too, differently, less visibly, but still suffering. The textile operation you started, he said, watching her work through the accounts, you could expand it. With proper funding, you could supply every garrison north of London. I know. I've been planning it for months, but I didn't have the capital. You do now. He pulled out a document. I've opened an account in your name, £50,000 to start. More if you need it. Eliza stared at the paper. £50,000. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. More money than Thornfield had generated in 50 years. I can't accept this. Why not? Because it feels like buying forgiveness. It's not. It's paying a debt. Alistair leaned forward, intense despite his weakness. You saved Thornfield with nothing. Imagine what you could do with resources. Please. Let me help you build what you've already started. She thought about Sarah and Thomas and Mrs. Davison, about the women who sewed in the workshop, about the families who'd trusted her to lead them out of poverty, about everything they could do with real funding. All right, she said, but I'm in charge. You don't interfere. Wouldn't dream of it. They fell into a strange routine over the following weeks. Mornings, Eliza worked on estate business, expanding the Thornfield operation, planning renovations, coordinating with suppliers. Afternoons, she sat with Alistair, listening to him explain his various business interests, learning the systems he'd built. Evenings were harder. That's when they talked about everything else. Why didn't you ever visit? She asked one night. They were in the library, fire crackling, Alistair looking increasingly frail. Fear, mostly, and shame. I knew what I'd done was wrong, but admitting it would mean facing you. Easier to stay away and pretend the problem didn't exist. I wrote to you. Those first 6 months I wrote every week, asking for help, for guidance, for anything. You never responded. I know, I burned the letters without reading them. That's cruel. It was. I'm sorry. Sorry. Such a small word for such massive damage. What would you have done, Eliza asked, if I'd failed? If Thornfield had collapsed completely and I'd come back to London begging for help? He was quiet for a long time. I honestly don't know. Part of me would have been relieved, proof that I was right to keep my distance. But another part, he trailed off. What? Another part would have been devastated, because even when I was hiding from you, I was aware of you. Reading reports from the steward, hearing rumors about the strange duchess in the north. I told myself I didn't care, but I checked on you constantly. Obsessively, really. You were watching me? From a distance? I knew about the timber you cut that first winter, the textile business, the robbery attempt. Every time word reached London of something you'd done, I was terrified and proud and furious with myself in equal measure. Eliza didn't know what to do with that information. He'd been watching, caring in his twisted way, just not enough to actually help. If you die, she said bluntly, your cousin inherits everything except what you've specifically left to me. Yes. He'll try to destroy what I've built. You said yourself he's not kind. Edmund is a snake. He'll sell Thornfield immediately, probably to developers who'll strip it for parts. Alistair's expression darkened. Which is why I've made arrangements. What kind of arrangements? The kind that ensure Edmund gets as little as possible. Most of my wealth is in private companies and trusts that can be transferred outside the dukedom. You'll have access to all of it. He gets the title and the entailed properties, which are impressive but mostly ceremonial. You get the actual power. He'll fight that. Let him. My solicitors are better than his. Over the next 2 weeks, Eliza watched Alistair grow weaker. The fever came and went in waves. Some days he was lucid, sharp, almost like his old self. Other days, he barely knew where he was. She found herself caring despite every logical reason not to. Found herself staying up through the bad nights, keeping him company through the fever dreams, making sure he ate even when he had no appetite. "Why are you doing this?" he asked one particularly bad night. His skin was burning, eyes too bright. "Doing what?" "Staying, taking care of me. You should hate me." "I do hate you," she said. "Or I did. Now it's more complicated." "How so?" "You destroyed the life I expected to have. But the life I built instead, the person I became, I don't entirely hate that. And you made it possible, even if you didn't mean to." "That's a generous interpretation." "I'm not being generous, I'm being honest." She wiped his forehead with a cool cloth. "You were cruel and cowardly, but you also gave me Thornfield, and Thornfield gave me purpose. I'm glad something good came from my failures. Don't die congratulating yourself," she said sharply. "You still have a lot to answer for." He laughed weakly. "There's the woman I married, fierce even when she's being kind." "I'm not being kind, I'm being practical. If you die before changing your will, I'm going to be very angry." "The will is changed, signed 2 weeks ago. Good." Bitte. But as she sat there in the dark London townhouse, listening to him struggle for breath, Eliza realized something that terrified her. She didn't want him to die. Not because she'd forgiven him, not because she loved him, but because somewhere in the brutal honesty of the past weeks, they'd started to build something real, something neither of them had expected. And she wanted more time to see what it could become. The crisis came on a Thursday, 6 weeks after she'd arrived in London. Alistair woke screaming, fever so high he was convulsing. The physician came immediately, worked for hours, finally emerged shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Your Grace, it's time to say goodbye. He won't last the night." Eliza went into that room and sat beside the bed, holding Alistair's burning hand. His eyes were closed. His breathing was labored. He looked like he was already half gone. "Don't you dare," she said quietly. "Don't you dare die now. Not when we're finally starting to understand each other." His eyes opened, barely. "Eliza? I'm here. Did we succeed? Fix things?" "No, but we started to. That's something." "I'm sorry. For everything. Stop apologizing and fight. You're a duke, aren't you? Start acting like one." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Then his eyes closed again, and for a horrible moment she thought he was gone. But his hand tightened on hers. Just slightly. Barely perceptible. He fought through that night. And the next. Against all medical expectations, Alistair Rowe didn't die. He got worse before he got better. Much worse. There were days Eliza was sure she'd lose him, days the physician prepared her for the end. But somehow, impossibly, he held on. And slowly, incrementally, he started to improve. "You're too stubborn to die," Eliza told him when he was finally lucid again, 2 weeks after the crisis. "Just like someone else I know. Must run in the family. We're married, after all." "Are we? Really married, or just legally bound? Which would you prefer?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in another 6 weeks." He did survive those 6 weeks, and the 6 after that. Winter turned to spring. His fever broke. His strength slowly returned. The doctors, baffled, declared it a miracle. Eliza thought it was stubbornness and spite, but she kept that opinion to herself. "I want to see Thornfield," Alistair said one morning in early spring. They were in the library reviewing business correspondence. He still tired easily, still looked gaunt, but he was alive. Impossibly, unexpectedly alive. What? Thornfield, I want to see what you've built. You're barely strong enough to walk the length of this townhouse. Then we'll go slowly. Please, Eliza, I need to see it. I need to understand what I threw away and what you made from it. She wanted to say no, wanted to keep London and Thornfield separate, keep this fragile new understanding isolated from the harsh reality of the North. But he was right. If they were going to truly move forward, he needed to see, needed to face what his cruelty had created. All right, she said, but if you collapse halfway there, I'm leaving you on the side of the road. Fair. They traveled north in careful stages, stopping frequently for Alistair to rest. Eliza sent word ahead to Mrs. Davison and Thomas, warning them the Duke was coming. The response came back within days. Understood. We'll prepare. But, Your Grace, are you sure about this? She wasn't, but they were doing it anyway. As the carriage climbed into the moors, Eliza watched Alistair's face. He was staring out the window at the landscape, bleak, harsh, beautiful in its own severe way. This is what you've lived with for 3 years, he said quietly. Yes. It's harder than I imagined, more isolated. That was the point, wasn't it? To put me somewhere I'd be forgotten. He flinched but didn't argue. Then the carriage crested a hill, and there it was, Thornfield Manor. But not the Thornfield he'd sent her to, not the dying, decaying tomb. The roof was repaired, solid and weather-tight. The windows were clean, many replaced entirely. The grounds were cleared and organized. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. Tenant cottages stood sturdy in the fields beyond, and she could see sheep grazing where there'd once been nothing but dead grass. The carriage stopped. Eliza stepped down, and immediately the front door opened. Mrs. Davison, Thomas, Sarah, all the tenant families, everyone she'd worked with, fought with, built with, standing there watching. Not servants waiting for orders, equals greeting a partner. Welcome home, Your Grace, Mrs. Davison said. Then more carefully, Your Grace. This to Alistair, who was climbing down slowly, leaning on his cane. The silence was thick. Everyone staring at the Duke who'd abandoned them all. Thomas stepped forward, jaw tight. So you finally decided to visit? Thomas, Eliza said warningly. No, he's right. Alistair's voice was steady despite his weakness. I abandoned this estate and everyone on it. I have no excuse, only regret and a hope that I might somehow begin to earn your forgiveness. Forgiveness? Margaret Fletcher, still the most openly hostile of the tenants, pushed forward. You want forgiveness? Do you have any idea what we went through because of you? I'm beginning to understand, but I'd like to know more, if you're willing to tell me. That stopped them. They'd expected arrogance, dismissal, aristocratic disdain, not humility, not interest. Well, Thomas said finally, I suppose you'd better come inside. What followed was the strangest afternoon of Eliza's life. The community she'd built, her people, really, showing Alistair everything they'd accomplished. The workshop where women sewed, the restored gardens, the functioning stables, the tenant cottages with their new roofs and solid walls. And with each thing they showed him, they told stories. About the first brutal winter, the timber Eliza had cut, the robberies, the sick children, the slow grinding work of turning nothing into something. Alistair listened, asked questions, didn't make excuses or try to minimize what they had endured. You built an empire, he said to Eliza that evening. They were alone in the study, her study, really, the place where she'd planned and schemed and fought to survive. A real community, with nothing, with what I had to work with, which was nothing because of me. He looked around the room, simple, functional, nothing like the grand London townhouse. This is more impressive than anything I've ever built, because you did it without advantages, without wealth or privilege or safety nets, just will and intelligence and courage. Don't romanticize it, it was brutal. I hated you every day for the first year. You should have hated me every day for all 3 years. I did, but then I got too busy surviving to focus on hating. He smiled at that. Then, what do we do now? What do you mean? I mean, I'm here, in your kingdom, in the life you built without me. Do I stay? Do I go? Do I have any place here at all? Eliza looked at him. This man who'd destroyed her future and accidentally given her a better one, who'd nearly died and fought back to life, who'd traveled hundreds of miles while barely able to stand just to see what she'd made. I don't know, she said honestly, but maybe we could figure it out together. I'd like that. She was about to respond when Thomas burst through the door, face white with panic. Your Grace, both of you need to come now. What's wrong? Riders, armed men, coming up the North Road fast. Thomas was breathing hard. And they're flying Lord Edmund's colors. Alistair went very still. Edmund, here. Now. Who's Edmund? Thomas demanded. My cousin, Alistair said. The man who inherits if I die. Why would he? Eliza stopped, understanding flooding through her. He thinks you're already dead. He's come to claim the estate and evict everyone on it. Immediately. Alistair tried to stand, nearly fell. You need to hide, Eliza said sharply. If Edmund sees you, if he knows you're alive, we lose any element of surprise. He'll destroy everything you've built. Then we'll stop him, but not if you collapse. Thomas, get the Duke somewhere safe. Mrs. Davison, gather everyone in the main hall, now. They moved, fast. Within minutes, Alistair was hidden in a third-floor bedroom, protesting but too weak to argue effectively. The entire Thornfield community was assembled in the entrance hall, looking scared and angry and ready for a fight. And Eliza stood at the front door, watching a dozen armed riders approaching through the twilight, and made a decision that would change everything. She would not run, would not hide, would not let anyone destroy what they'd built. The riders stopped in front of the manor. A man dismounted, tall, well-dressed, with Alistair's features but crueler. Edmund Rowe. He looked at Eliza with undisguised contempt. You must be the unfortunate widow, he said. I'm here to take possession of my inheritance. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises. Eliza smiled, cold and sharp. No. I beg your pardon. I said no. This is my home. These are my people, and you're not taking anything. Edmund's hand moved to the pistol at his belt. I don't think you understand the situation. Your husband is dead. This estate is mine now. You have no authority here. Funny thing about that, Eliza said. Behind her she heard footsteps, slow, unsteady, but determined. Alistair appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane but very much alive. Hello, Edmund, he said. I hear you've come to steal my estate. That's unfortunate because I'm not quite dead yet. Edmund's face went white, then red with fury. His hand tightened on the pistol, and Eliza saw murder in his eyes. And in that moment, she understood. Edmund wasn't here to claim an inheritance. He was here to make sure Alistair stayed dead. The courtyard went dead silent. Edmund's hand froze on his pistol, his face cycling through shock, rage, and something that looked horribly like calculation. Behind him, his men shifted nervously, hands moving toward their own weapons. You're supposed to be dying, Edmund said, voice tight. I was. Got better. Alistair took another step forward, and Eliza could see how much it cost him, sweat beading on his forehead, knuckles white on the cane, but his voice stayed steady. Surprising, I know. Must be quite the disappointment for you. This changes nothing. You're weak. You can barely stand. How long before the fever comes back? A month? A week? Edmund's hand relaxed slightly on the pistol, confidence returning. I've already made arrangements. Buyers for the property, plans for development. You can't stop what's already in motion. Watch me. You and what army? A dying duke and his abandoned wife? Edmund laughed, cold and sharp. I have 12 armed men. You have farmers and servants. This isn't a fight you can win. He's not alone, Eliza said. She moved to stand beside Alistair, close enough their shoulders nearly touched. And you're trespassing. Trespassing? This is family property. That belongs to the Duke, who is standing right here, alive. She looked past Edmund to his men. Put down your weapons and leave, or we call the magistrate for armed invasion of private property. The magistrate? Edmund's smile was cruel. You mean Justice Whitmore? Who happens to be a close friend of mine? who's already been informed of my dear cousin's tragic passing and has pre-approved the estate transfer. That magistrate? Eliza felt her stomach drop. Of course. Edmund hadn't come here on impulse. He'd planned this. Bribed officials, arranged sales, built a complete legal framework around Alistair's expected death. That's fraud, Alistair said. Prove it. Your word against mine and a dozen witnesses who'll swear they were told you died in London. By the time you sort out the legal mess, I'll have sold everything and disappeared with the money. You can't sell what I've already transferred out of the estate, Alistair said. His voice was getting weaker, exhausted by even this much standing. The trusts, the companies, the actual wealth, it's all gone. Moved into private holdings you have no claim to. Edmund's expression darkened. You're lying. Ask Pembroke, my solicitor, who, unlike your magistrate friend, can't be bribed. Alistair swayed slightly, and Eliza grabbed his arm to steady him. All you inherit is the title, and whatever entailed properties can't be separated, which amounts to approximately £3,000 annually and a lot of legal headaches. Congratulations. That's impossible. The Rowe fortune is mine to distribute as I see fit, which I did, weeks ago. Alistair's smile was sharp despite his weakness. Sorry to ruin your plans. For a moment, Eliza thought Edmund might actually shoot them both. His face was purple with rage, hand trembling on the pistol. The armed men behind him looked uncertain now, sensing this wasn't going according to plan. Then Edmund took a breath, forced his expression into something calmer, more dangerous. Fine, he said. You've made your legal arrangements. Very clever. But there's still the matter of this estate. Thornfield, which is entailed property that comes with the title. He gestured at the manor, the land, everything. When you die, and you will die soon, cousin, we both know it, this becomes mine, and I will burn it to the ground just to spite you. Over my dead body, Eliza said. That can be arranged. Edmund's eyes were cold. Accidents happen in the countryside, especially to women living alone in remote locations. Thomas stepped forward from the crowd behind them, shotgun visible. She's not alone. Sarah appeared beside him, and then Margaret, and then all the tenant families, all the staff, all the people who'd spent 3 years building this place from nothing. A dozen people facing Edmund's armed men, and not one of them looked like they planned to back down. You'll have to go through all of us, Thomas said flatly. Edmund laughed. You think I won't? You're farmers. My men are soldiers. Your men are hired thugs, Eliza said, who probably don't want to die for whatever you're paying them, especially not when killing a duke and his household would mean the gallows. She raised her voice, addressing the armed riders directly. Is he paying you enough to hang? Several of the men exchanged glances. One of them, older than the rest, lowered his weapon slightly. We were told this was a legal eviction, he said. Nobody said anything about murder. That's because it's not legal, Eliza said. The Duke is alive. This is his property, and you're committing armed trespass. Walk away now, and we'll forget this happened. Stay, and we prosecute. Don't listen to her, Edmund snapped. She's nobody. A merchant's daughter who married up and thinks that gives her authority. I'm the Duchess of Thornfield, Eliza interrupted, voice cutting. I've run this estate for 3 years while you were scheming in London. I've built businesses, negotiated contracts, and personally shot at robbers who threatened my people. So when I tell you to get off my property, I'm not asking. I'm warning. The older soldier made a decision. He holstered his weapon and dismounted. I'm out. This isn't what I signed up for. 2 others followed him, then 3 more. Edmund watched his support crumble with visible fury. You'll regret this, all of you. You'll what? Alistair asked tiredly. Sue us? Good luck. Threaten us? We're armed, and you're not. Kill us? You just lost half your men, and the rest are reconsidering their life choices. He took a breath, clearly at the end of his strength. Go home, Edmund. You lost. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Now get out before I have you arrested for trespassing and conspiracy to commit fraud. For a long moment, Edmund stood there, visibly wrestling with rage and pragmatism. Then he remounted his horse with sharp, violent movements. You're dying anyway, he said to Alistair. I'll wait, and when you're gone, I'll come back for everything. He looked at Eliza, and his smile was poisonous. Especially you, Duchess. We'll see how brave you are when you don't have your farmers protecting you. Try it, Eliza said, and find out. Edmund wheeled his horse and rode off. The remaining men followed, except for the three who'd defected. They stood uncertainly in the courtyard, looking at Eliza. We need work, the older soldier said. And we're good at what we do. If you're hiring security, Eliza looked at Thomas, who shrugged. We could use some trained men, especially if that bastard comes back. All right, Eliza said. But you work for us, not against us. Understood? Yes, Your Grace. Alistair swayed, nearly fell. Eliza caught him, felt how much he was shaking. Inside, she said, now. They got him to the study, settled him in a chair by the fire. Mrs. Davison appeared with hot tea and blankets. The entire confrontation had lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it had clearly cost Alistair everything he had. That was stupid, Eliza said, kneeling beside him. You could have collapsed out there. Would have been worth it to see his face. If you die proving a point, I'll kill you myself. He laughed weakly. Fair. Then more seriously, thank you for standing with me. Did you think I wouldn't? I didn't know. We've barely begun to trust each other. Edmund was threatening your home, your people. You could have negotiated with him, offered him something to leave peacefully. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to destroy. Eliza poured tea, forced him to drink some. Besides, this is our home now, both of ours. I'm not letting him take it. Our home, Alistair repeated softly. I like the sound of that. Over the following days, they dealt with the aftermath, sent formal complaints to the magistrate, not Whitmore, but his superior in York, documented everything Edmund had done, reinforced the estate's security with the newly hired men. But more than that, they started actually living together, not in London, where everything was formal and distant, but here at Thornfield, where life was real and immediate. It was awkward at first. 3 years of separation wasn't easily bridged. They had to learn each other all over again, or rather, learn each other for the first time, since they'd never really known each other to begin with. You're up early, Alistair said one morning, finding Eliza already in the study at dawn, going over accounts. Habit. The work doesn't stop just because we had a dramatic confrontation. Can I help? She looked up, surprised. You want to help with estate management? I want to understand what you've built, how it works, what you need. He settled into the other chair, moving more easily now as his strength slowly returned. Teach me. So she did. Showed him the textile operation, the rental arrangements, the agricultural plans. Explained the delicate balance of managing tenant relationships, negotiating with suppliers, maintaining quality while keeping costs low. This is remarkable, he said, reviewing the ledgers. You've increased revenue by 300% in 3 years. 400 if you count the first winter, when revenue was 0. And you did this with no training. I had training, just not the kind taught in schools. Eliza marked a correction in the accounts. I learned by doing, by failing and trying again, by asking questions and listening to people who knew more than me. I never learned that way. I was taught business by tutors and universities, given knowledge without context. He was quiet for a moment. You're a better manager than I am. That's not... It's true. You built relationships. I built systems. Systems fail when people don't believe in them. Relationships endure. It was the most honest assessment she'd heard from him. No false modesty, no self-pity, just recognition of different strengths. Then we work together, she said. You handle the high-level business, the London connections, the large-scale deals. I handle Thornfield and the operations here. We play to our strengths. Partnership. Actual partnership. Not you making decisions and me following them. Agreed. They started meeting daily to coordinate. Eliza would present problems or opportunities. Alistair would offer resources or connections. They'd argue, compromise, find solutions neither had seen alone. It wasn't smooth. They disagreed frequently about spending priorities, about how much risk to take, about whether to expand operations or consolidate. Eliza was aggressive, willing to gamble on growth. Alistair was conservative, wanting security first. You're being too cautious, Eliza said during one particularly heated debate about purchasing new equipment. We need to invest to grow. And you're being reckless. What if the investment fails? We'd lose everything. We've survived on nothing. We can survive a setback, but we'll never thrive if we're too scared to try. I'm not scared. I'm being responsible. You're being controlled by fear. Again. She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth, but they were out now, hanging in the air between them. Alistair went very still. That's not fair. Isn't it? You sent me away because you were afraid. You avoided checking on me because you were afraid. Now you're refusing to invest in growth because you're afraid we'll lose what we've built. When do you stop letting fear make your decisions? When did you become so comfortable with risk? He shot back. You grew up in a family destroyed by reckless gambling. Your father's poor decisions are why we're in this situation. And now you want to do the same thing? That's completely different. Is it? Or are you so determined to prove you're nothing like him that you're ignoring legitimate caution? They stared at each other, both breathing hard, the study suddenly too small and too tense. Maybe we're both right, Eliza said finally. Maybe I need to be more careful, and you need to be more willing to risk. Maybe. Or maybe we're both damaged and trying to make decisions from broken places. Alistair laughed suddenly, unexpected and genuine. That's probably more accurate. The tension broke. Not resolved exactly, but acknowledged. They were both works in progress, both learning, both carrying wounds that shaped how they saw the world. Compromise, Alistair said. We make the equipment purchase, but we do it in stages. Test with a small investment first, expand if it works. That's actually sensible. Don't sound so surprised. As weeks passed, the community's attitude toward Alistair shifted. At first, they'd been hostile. This was the man who'd abandoned them, after all. But as they watched him work beside Eliza, watched him listen to their concerns, watched him actually invest in improvements rather than just taking profits, skepticism began to crack. He's not what I expected, Sarah admitted to Eliza one afternoon. They were in the workshop, overseeing a new batch of production. He actually seems to care. He does, in his own complicated way. You forgave him, then. I don't know if forgive is the right word. I'm choosing to work with him, build with him, see what we can create together. Eliza paused. Is that forgiveness or just pragmatism? Maybe both. The real test came when Thomas brought a problem to them. A neighboring landowner, Lord Ashford, was trying to claim part of the eastern fields, saying the boundary markers had been moved and the land was historically his. It's not, Thomas said, angry and frustrated. We've had surveys, documents. Everything proves those fields are ours. But he's got money and connections, and he thinks he can bully us into giving up the land. What do you want to do? Alistair asked. Thomas blinked, surprised to be asked. Me? It's your home, your land effectively, since you work it. What do you think the best response is? I think we fight, legally. Show him our documents and tell him to back off. And if he doesn't? Then we get ugly. Make it clear that taking our land means going through us. Alistair nodded. Then that's what we'll do. Eliza, can you compile the legal documents? I'll reach out to my solicitor in York, have him review everything, and prepare a formal response. And if Ashford escalates? Eliza asked. Then we escalate with him. I'm done being intimidated by men who think power means they can steal from those with less. Alistair met Thomas's eyes. Your family has worked this land for 3 years. You've earned it. Nobody takes it. Thomas stared at him, clearly reassessing. Thank you, Your Grace. Thank me by winning, and call me Alistair. Your Grace from you feels wrong. After Thomas left, Eliza turned to Alistair. That was different. What was? You, actually listening, actually valuing his opinion. He knows this land better than I ever will. Why wouldn't I listen to him? Because 6 months ago, you wouldn't have. You would have made the decision yourself and expected everyone to follow. Alistair considered that. You're right. I would have, but I've been watching you work. The way you lead. It's not about commanding, it's about collaboration. I'm trying to learn. Keep trying, it's working. The Ashford situation resolved within weeks. Alistair's solicitor presented overwhelming evidence that the boundary claims were fabricated. Ashford, faced with legal consequences for fraud, backed down immediately. Word spread. The Duke of Thornfield, once absent, once cruel, was protecting his people, actually fighting for them. "Things are changing," Mrs. Davison said one evening. She and Eliza were in the kitchen, preparing food for a community dinner Eliza had organized. "People are starting to see him differently. He's earned it. He's working hard." "So are you. Harder than before, even." Mrs. Davison gave her a sharp look. "Why? You already proved yourself. You don't need to keep pushing." "Because it's not enough to survive anymore. I want us to thrive, all of us. And that means building something sustainable, something that lasts beyond just this generation." "Ambitious." "Is that a criticism?" "No, just an observation. You've changed too, Your Grace. You're not just surviving anymore. You're building an empire." That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, looking out over Thornfield. The manor with its lights glowing warm, the cottages beyond, the fields stretching to the dark horizon. 3 years ago, she'd stood at this same window feeling trapped, abandoned, terrified. Now she felt… what? Not happy exactly. The wounds were too fresh for that, but purposeful, powerful, like she'd finally found the place she was meant to be. A knock on her door startled her. "Come in." Alistair entered, hesitant. "I saw your light on. Couldn't sleep either?" "Too much thinking." "About Edmund?" "About everything. About us. About what we're building here." She turned to face him. "Do you ever wonder if this is real? If we're actually managing to fix what was broken, or if we're just pretending?" "Every day." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "But then I see what you've created, and I think maybe pretending is how you start. You act like something's possible until it actually becomes possible." That's surprisingly philosophical for someone who claims to only understand business. "I'm learning. From you." They stood in silence for a moment, both looking out at their kingdom. "I need to tell you something," Alistair said. "About Edmund. He's not going to give up. Men like him don't. And when I die, you're not dying. When I eventually die, whether that's tomorrow or 40 years from now, he'll come back, and he'll be more prepared, more vicious. Then we'll be more prepared too." "Eliza, I'm serious. He's dangerous, and you'll be vulnerable. Stop." She turned to face him fully. "Stop planning for your death. Stop assuming I'll need protecting. I've survived 3 years alone. I faced down armed men. I built this place from ruins. If Edmund comes back, I'll handle him, with or without you. I know you will, but I'd like to help you be ready." "How?" "By making you legally untouchable, by transferring not just wealth but power, by ensuring that when I'm gone, you have every tool you need to defend what we've built." "We've built," she repeated, "not me alone anymore. We." "Yes, we." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can't undo the past, but I'd like to build a future. With you. As actual partners." Eliza looked down at their joined hands. His was warm, solid, real. A month ago, she would have pulled away, would have refused to trust. But something had changed. Maybe several things. "I don't forgive you," she said honestly. "Not completely. Maybe not ever. What you did was too cruel. But…" She squeezed his hand. "But I think I'm willing to try building something new. Not forgetting the past, but not being ruled by it either. That's more than I deserve." "Probably. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I want to, because when we work together, we're stronger than either of us alone, and because…" She paused, searching for words. "Because I think we could actually be happy. Eventually. If we both keep trying." "I'd like that." "Then keep trying." He did. They both did. Over the following weeks, they worked to integrate their lives completely. Alistair started handling more of the day-to-day operations, taking pressure off Eliza. She started teaching him the details of running Thornfield. Not the theories she'd learned from books, but the practical reality of managing people and land. They made mistakes, had arguments, misunderstood each other. But they kept talking, kept working through it, kept choosing to stay rather than retreat. You're different when you're working, Alistair observed one afternoon. They were in the fields consulting with Thomas about spring planting. More confident, decisive. This is what I know. Here, I'm certain. And in London? In London, I was lost, trying to be someone I wasn't. Here, I can be myself. Then we'll spend most of our time here, build our life at Thornfield, not in London. You'd do that? Give up the city? The city has nothing I want anymore. Everything important is here. The spring planting was successful. The textile business expanded into 3 new markets. The rental rooms stayed full. Money started flowing not just steadily, but abundantly. We're not just surviving, Eliza said, reviewing the quarterly accounts. We're actually profitable, significantly profitable. Thanks to your management. Thanks to both of us. You negotiated the supply contracts. I couldn't have gotten those terms alone. Partnership, Alistair said, smiling. Partnership. The first real celebration came in late spring, when they paid off the last of the debts from Thornfield's previous incarnation and had enough surplus to give every tenant family a significant bonus. This is yours, Eliza said, handing Thomas an envelope. Your share of the profits, as we agreed. Thomas opened it, saw the amount, went pale. This is more than I make in a year. You earned it. All of you did. You built this place with me. With us, Alistair corrected, joining them. We all built it together. That evening, they held a feast. Everyone from the estate, all the staff, all the tenants, even the security men who had defected from Edmund. Tables set up in the restored gardens, food and drink flowing freely, celebration replacing the grim survival mentality that had dominated for so long. Speech, someone called, and others picked it up. Speech from the Duchess. Eliza stood reluctantly. She'd never been comfortable with public speaking, but these were her people. They deserved words. 3 years ago, she said, voice carrying across the garden, I came here with nothing. You could have resented me, could have made things impossible. Instead, you gave me a chance. You worked beside me. You trusted me. And together we turned a dying estate into something alive and thriving. Cheers erupted. She waited for them to quiet. But this isn't my achievement. It's ours. Every person here contributed. Every family worked. Every decision was made together. So when we celebrate tonight, we're not celebrating one person. We're celebrating what we built as a community, what we'll continue to build together. More cheers, louder now. Thomas raised his glass. To the Duchess. To Thornfield, others called. To all of us, Eliza finished. She sat down, suddenly overwhelmed. Alistair leaned close, speaking quietly under the noise of celebration. You're extraordinary, he said. You know that, don't you? I'm just doing what needed doing. No, you're doing what nobody else could do. You're leading, really leading, not through fear or authority, but through respect and collaboration. It's remarkable. She looked at him, this man who'd hurt her so badly, who'd somehow become someone she could work with, maybe even care about. We're both learning. You're better at this than you think. Only because you're teaching me. The celebration went late into the night. Music, dancing, laughter, things Thornfield hadn't seen in decades. Eliza watched it all, feeling something settle in her chest. Not contentment exactly, but belonging, purpose, home. Eliza, Alistair said quietly, finding her alone for a moment. The party continued around them, but they stood slightly apart in a pocket of relative privacy. I need to say something. What? Thank you for giving me a chance, for not walking away when you every right to, he struggled with the words, for showing me what partnership actually means. I thought I understood. I didn't, but I'm learning. Because of you. We're learning together. No, you already knew. You had to teach me, and I'm grateful. He took a breath. I know we're not there yet. I know you don't fully trust me, and I don't blame you, but I want you to know I'm committed to this, to us, to building something real for however long I have. Stop talking about dying. I mean it, though. Whether I have weeks or decades, I want to spend that time proving I can be the partner you deserve, that we can be actual equals. Eliza studied his face in the lamplight. Earnest, vulnerable, nothing like the cold man she'd married 3 years ago. You're getting there. We both are. Is that enough? For now, yes. Ask me again in another year. He smiled. I will. The celebration finally wound down near midnight. People drifted back to their cottages, happy and full and hopeful. Eliza and Alistair walked through the gardens together, surveying the aftermath of the party. We should do this more often, Alistair said. Celebrate successes, build community, not just work. Agreed. We've been so focused on surviving that we forgot to actually live. No more just surviving. Now we thrive. They reached the manor steps. Alistair hesitated. Will you... He stopped, started again. Would you like company? To talk, I mean. About plans for tomorrow, or just anything? A month ago, Eliza would have said no, would have retreated to the safety of solitude. But tonight, after watching their community celebrate, after seeing what they'd built together, she found herself wanting connection instead of isolation. Yes, she said. I'd like that. They went inside to the study that had become their shared workspace. Alistair built up the fire while Eliza poured wine. They settled into chairs, comfortable silence stretching between them. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd been different from the start? Alistair asked suddenly. If I'd actually tried to make our marriage real instead of pushing you away? Sometimes, but it's pointless speculation. Is it? Because I think about it constantly. How much pain I could have prevented. How much better things could have been. Or how much worse. Maybe we needed this. The separation, the struggle, the individual growth. Maybe if we'd started together, we'd have fallen into old patterns. You commanding, me obeying, never actually becoming equals. That's generous. It's honest. I wouldn't be who I am now if you hadn't forced me to become strong alone. And you wouldn't be learning to collaborate if you hadn't seen what I built without you. She took a sip of wine. So maybe the path we took, horrible as it was necessary. I still wish I'd caused less pain. So do I. But we can't change it. We can only move forward. Forward, then. He raised his glass. To the future. Whatever it holds. To the future, Eliza echoed. They drank, and in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the home they'd built together, Eliza allowed herself something she hadn't permitted in 3 years. Hope. Not the naive hope of the girl who'd married a stranger, but the hard-earned, realistic hope of someone who'd survived the worst and knew she could handle whatever came next. And whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone anymore. The threat came 3 weeks later, not with riders and guns this time, but with lawyers and documents. Injunction, Pembroke said grimly, spreading papers across the study desk. Edmonds filed suit claiming the estate transfers were made under duress. He's arguing you were mentally unfit due to illness when you signed over the assets. Therefore, the transfers are invalid. Eliza felt her stomach drop. Can he do that? He can try. The case is weak. We have physician statements confirming you were lucid. But weak doesn't mean harmless. This will tie up the estate in legal proceedings for months, possibly years. During that time, all operations are frozen. No buying, no selling, no expanding. So we're trapped, Alistair said. He looked pale, the morning light showing every line of exhaustion on his face. He can't win, but he can strangle us slowly with bureaucracy. Essentially. Eliza stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, workers were in the fields, preparing for summer planting. The textile workshop was humming with activity. Everything they'd built, thriving and functional, now threatened by legal paperwork. There has to be a way to fight this, she said. There is, through the courts. But it takes time and money, both of which Edmund has more of than we do. That's not true, Alistair said slowly. We have resources, the trusts, the private holdings, which are also being challenged in the suit. If Edmund wins, those revert to the estate too. Then we need to win decisively, not just legally, publicly. Eliza turned back to face them. Edmund's strategy relies on us being isolated, vulnerable, easy to attack. What if we're not? What if we make Thornfield too visible, too important, too connected to tear down? How? Pembroke asked. By turning it into something bigger than just an estate. something that matters to more people than just us. Over the next hour, she laid out her plan. It was ambitious, possibly insane, and would require every resource they had plus some they'd need to borrow. But it was also the kind of bold move that could change everything. "You want to turn Thornfield into a textile manufacturing center," Pembroke said, making sure he understood. "Not just a small operation for local markets, but a major supplier for the entire North. And a training center. We teach skills, employ people from across the region, become an economic anchor." Eliza pulled out sketches she'd been working on for months. "We already have the basic infrastructure. We just need to scale it up, massively." "That requires capital we don't have access to during the lawsuit," Alistair said, but his tone was interested, not dismissive. "Then we find investors, people who'd benefit from a northern manufacturing center, merchants who need reliable suppliers, towns that need employment for their people. We make this bigger than us. And if Edmund still wins in court? Then he inherits an operation with dozens of investors, hundreds of employees, contracts with towns and companies across 3 counties. Trying to shut it down would destroy too many people. The public backlash alone would ruin him politically." Pembroke was nodding slowly. "It's clever, very clever. You're making the estate too important to kill." "Exactly. And we do it fast before the courts can stop us. We're not frozen yet. That takes weeks to process. We use that time to build momentum Edmund can't reverse." "It's risky," Alistair said. "If we fail, we won't fail. We can't afford to." Eliza met his eyes. "You told me to stop being reckless. I'm not being reckless now. I'm being strategic. This is how we win." He studied her face, then smiled. "Then let's do it." They moved fast. Within days, Eliza was traveling to neighboring towns, meeting with merchants and town councils, making her pitch. Alistair handled the business side, drawing up contracts and investment terms. Pembroke worked on the legal framework to protect what they were building. The response was mixed at first. Many were skeptical. A duchess trying to build a manufacturing empire in the remote moors? It seemed far-fetched. But Eliza had something they couldn't ignore: a working model. She brought samples of their textiles, showed production numbers, demonstrated that Thornfield was already profitable on a small scale. "You're asking us to invest in an estate that's under lawsuit," one merchant, a shrewd woman named Catherine Hayes, pointed out. "That's a substantial risk." "You're not investing in an estate, you're investing in an operation. The lawsuit challenges ownership, not function. Regardless of who owns Thornfield, these contracts hold. Your goods get produced, your workers get trained, your investment pays returns. Unless the new owner shuts it down, which would cost them more than keeping it running. We're structuring this so shutting down means breach of contract with dozens of parties. The legal fees alone would be catastrophic." Catherine leaned back, reassessing. "You've thought this through." "I've had 3 years of practice surviving impossible situations. This is just another one. And if I invest, what do I get? Priority supplier status, guaranteed pricing, and a share of profits proportional to investment, plus first access to trained workers if you want to expand your own operations. How much are you looking for?" "50,000 total, divided among 10 investors, 5,000 each." Catherine whistled. "That's substantial. So is the opportunity. Textiles are booming. The North needs production capacity. London's too expensive, too crowded. We're positioned perfectly, close enough to markets to ship efficiently, remote enough that costs stay low. Let me see your books." Eliza showed her everything. The past 3 years of operations, every penny accounted for, every decision documented. Catherine spent 2 hours going through it all while Eliza waited, trying not to show her desperation. "Your margins are thin," Catherine said finally. "They'll improve with scale. Right now we're limited by equipment. With proper funding, we can triple production while only doubling costs." "And you're confident you can manage an operation that large?" "I've managed this one from nothing. Larger is just more of the same." Catherine set down the ledgers. "I'll invest. 5,000. But I want quarterly reports and the right to inspect operations whenever I choose." Done. 1 investor down, 9 to go. It took 2 weeks of constant travel, negotiation, and persuasion, but Eliza secured the full 50,000. 10 investors, all carefully chosen for their resources and connections. People who'd benefit from Thornfield succeeding and had reason to protect it if Edmund attacked. Now comes the hard part, Alistair said when she returned. Actually building what you promised. We start immediately, before the court injunction can process. They did. Hired workers, 20 at first, then 40, then 60. Purchased equipment, negotiated supply contracts, expanded the workshop into 2 additional buildings, brought in experienced textile manufacturers from Leeds and Manchester to train the local workers, set up distribution networks reaching from Newcastle to Edinburgh. It was chaos. Beautiful, productive chaos. We need more space for finishing work, Sarah reported, covered in fabric dust. She'd gone from tenant farmer's wife to workshop supervisor, managing 30 women. The current setup is too cramped. Use the old stable, Eliza said. It's empty and structurally sound. We'll convert it. That'll cost. I know. Do it anyway. We're past the point of cautious spending. Mrs. Davison appeared with Thomas. The new workers need housing. We can't fit them all in the manor. Then we build cottages, fast. Thomas, can you supervise construction? If you give me budget and men. You have both. Whatever you need. Money flowed out like water, but it also started flowing in. Orders arrived faster than they could fill them. The army contract alone brought in thousands of pounds monthly. Merchants who'd been skeptical placed test orders, were satisfied, placed larger ones. We're actually doing this, Alistair said one evening. They were in the study, reviewing the day's progress. He looked exhausted, but energized in a way Eliza had never seen, building something real and substantial. We've been doing it for months. You're just now noticing? I knew we were surviving. I didn't realize we were thriving until today when I saw the production numbers. He showed her the ledger. We're on track to be one of the largest textile operations north of York within a year. That's not survival. That's success. Don't celebrate yet. Edmund's still out there. Let him come. Let him see what we've built and try to tear it down. He'll look like a villain destroying jobs and livelihoods. Public opinion alone will crush him. Eliza wanted to believe that, but experience had taught her to expect disaster. Sure enough, it came 6 weeks into the expansion. The magistrate, not Whitmore this time, but a higher court judge, issued a preliminary ruling on Edmund's suit. While the case proceeded, all major estate decisions required court approval. No new contracts without judicial review, no property changes without permission. This stops everything, Pembroke said grimly. Every expansion, every purchase, every contract, frozen until the court clears it, which could take months per item. But the existing operations can continue, Eliza asked. Those already in motion, yes. Anything new? No. Then we work with what we have. Push the current operations to maximum capacity while we fight the legal battle. Edmund will challenge even that. He's already filed secondary suits claiming you're deliberately devaluing the estate through reckless expansion. Reckless? We're increasing value exponentially. In his argument, you're taking on debt and obligations that endanger the estate's stability. And technically, he has a point. You've leveraged everything. If this fails, Thornfield collapses completely. Alistair and Eliza exchanged looks. Then we don't fail, Alistair said simply. The next 3 months were brutal. They operated at maximum capacity with minimal resources, unable to expand but refusing to contract. Edmund filed suit after suit, each one requiring time and legal fees to combat. The investors started getting nervous. I'm hearing rumors you're facing bankruptcy, Catherine Hayes said during an inspection visit. Is that true? We're facing legal challenges, Eliza corrected. Our operation is profitable. The debt is manageable. But Edmund is trying to make us look unstable to scare off support. Is it working? That depends. Are you scared? Catherine studied the workshop, women working efficiently, goods moving smoothly, everything organized and productive. No, this looks solid, but rumors are powerful. You need to counter them. How? Public demonstration. Show people this place is thriving, not failing. Make it impossible for Edmund to paint you as reckless. The idea crystallized quickly. A public event, open house, factory tours, demonstrations of their process. Invite merchants, town officials, anyone with influence. Show them Thornfield wasn't a failing estate, but a growing enterprise. It's risky, Alistair said. We're exposing ourselves. We're already exposed. This just lets us control the narrative. They planned it for midsummer, timing it to coincide with peak production, sent invitations across the north, made arrangements for visitors, prepared presentations, organized demonstrations. Edmund heard about it, of course. 2 days before the event, Pembroke brought disturbing news. He's planning to attend, along with several allies and the court-appointed estate inspector. He'll be looking for any violation, any excuse to claim you're mismanaging the property. Let him look, Eliza said. We have nothing to hide. You're sure? Because if he finds anything, one contract violation, one safety issue, one financial irregularity, he'll use it to shut you down completely. Then we make sure there's nothing to find. They spent 2 days inspecting every inch of the operation, fixing anything questionable, documenting everything. By the time the event arrived, Thornfield was as perfect as human effort could make it. Over 200 people attended. Merchants, town officials, investors, workers' families, curious neighbors. Eliza had organized tours every hour, showing the full process from raw materials to finished goods. Sarah demonstrated the training program. Thomas showed the housing facilities for workers. Mrs. Davison hosted a demonstration of how they managed large-scale food preparation for the growing community. Edmund arrived midday with an entourage of 6, lawyers, the court inspector, and several men Eliza didn't recognize but assumed were allies. He moved through the crowds with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, greeting people, making pleasant conversation. Eliza watched him carefully, looking for the attack she knew was coming. It came during the main presentation. She was explaining their business model to the assembled crowd when Edmund interrupted. "Impressive speech, cousin," he said loudly. "But perhaps you could explain how you're funding this expansion. The court documents show the estate is carrying significant debt. Isn't that risky?" The crowd shifted, uncertain. Eliza felt tension ripple through the space. "All business expansion involves calculated risk," she said calmly. "We've taken on debt, yes, but it's secured against projected earnings and backed by investor capital. Our debt-to-income ratio is well within safe margins." "According to whose calculation? You're not a trained accountant." "According to our accountant, our investors, and our auditor, all of whom have reviewed and approved our financial structure." She pulled out documents. "Here's the full financial breakdown, audited by Henderson and Associates in York. Independent verification that our operations are sound." Edmund's smile tightened. "And what about safety? I see you have over 100 workers now. Have you met all legal requirements for worker protection?" "We exceed them," he commented. "Would you like to see our safety protocols?" "I'd like the court inspector to see them." "Of course." Eliza gestured to the inspector, a nervous-looking man named Williams. "Mr. Williams, you're welcome to inspect any aspect of our operations. We have nothing to hide." For the next 2 hours, Williams went through everything while the event continued around him. Eliza maintained her presentations, gave tours, answered questions, all while knowing Edmund was watching for any slip, any mistake. Williams found nothing, because there was nothing to find. "Your operations meet or exceed all legal requirements," he announced publicly. "Worker safety, financial documentation, contract compliance, everything is in order." The crowd murmured, impressed. Edmund's expression went dark. "Very convenient," he said, "almost as if you prepared specifically for inspection." "We did," Eliza said, "because we knew you'd challenge us, so we made sure everything was perfect. That's called good management, not deception. Good management would be not risking the family estate on a textile factory. Good management is turning a dying estate into a thriving enterprise that employs over 100 people and generates more revenue in a month than this place made in a year under previous ownership." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only those nearby could hear. "You want this estate because you think it's valuable. The only reason it's valuable is because of the work we've done. Work you contributed nothing to. So stop pretending you care about protecting family assets when what you really want is to strip them for parts and sell them off." Edmund's face went red. "You have no right. I have every right. I'm the one who saved this place. I'm the one who built something from nothing, and I'm the one who'll keep building it, with or without your approval." She turned back to the crowd, raising her voice. "That's what Thornfield represents. Not inherited privilege or traditional authority. Real work, real community, real results. and anyone who wants to be part of that is welcome. Anyone who wants to tear it down for personal gain can leave. Silence. Then Catherine Hayes started clapping. Others joined her, building to genuine applause. Edmund stood there, visibly furious, realizing he'd lost the room. He'd come to expose them as frauds, and instead exposed himself as petty and vindictive. "This isn't over," he said to Eliza quietly. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." He left shortly after, his entourage trailing behind. The event continued, now with more energy, people excited by the confrontation and Eliza's defiance. "That was risky," Alistair said when he found her alone for a moment. "It was necessary. Edmund needed to see that we're not afraid of him." "I think everyone saw that." The event was a success. Orders flooded in over the following weeks. 3 new investors approached them. The court inspector's positive report undermined Edmund's legal arguments significantly. "His case is falling apart," Pembroke reported a month later. "The judge is inclined to dismiss most of the claims. The asset transfers were clearly legal. The expansion is demonstrably successful. Edmund has no standing." "So we win?" Eliza asked. "Likely, but court moves slowly. Final ruling could still take months." "Then we use those months to keep building." They did. By autumn, Thornfield employed over 150 people. The textile operation was the largest in the north. They'd expanded into related industries, finishing work, dyeing, specialized fabrics for medical and military use. Revenue was 10 times what it had been when Eliza first arrived. "You've built an empire," Alistair said one evening. They were walking the grounds together, a habit they'd developed. "A real substantial empire." "We've built it, together." "No. You built the foundation. I just helped expand it." "Stop being modest. Your business connections made half of this possible, and your vision made all of it necessary." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Eliza, I need to say something." "That sounds serious." "It is. I'm in love with you." She froze, staring at him. "What?" "I know it's complicated. I know I have no right to expect anything from you, but it's true. I've fallen in love with who you are, what you've built, how you lead, and I needed you to know, even if you don't feel the same way." Eliza's mind was racing. Love. He loved her, after everything, the cruelty, the abandonment, the slow rebuilding of trust. He loved her. Did she love him back? "I don't know what I feel," she said honestly. "It's complicated. You hurt me badly. I'm not sure I've forgiven that completely." "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just telling you the truth." "Why now?" "Because we might win this legal battle. And if we do, we'll have decisions to make about our future. Whether this partnership is just business or something more. And I wanted you to know where I stand before you decide." She studied his face. Earnest, vulnerable, nothing like the cold man she'd married. "I care about you. That's all I know for certain right now. I care about you, I trust you more than I thought I could, and I want to keep building this life together. Is that enough?" "For now, yes. For forever, I don't know. But I'm willing to keep trying if you are." "Then we keep trying." The final court ruling came in November, a week before the first snow. Pembroke arrived with the documents, smiling for the first time in months. "You won. Complete victory. All of Edmund's suits dismissed with prejudice. The asset transfers are validated. Your management decisions are upheld. Thornfield and all operations are legally secure." Eliza felt something enormous lift from her shoulders. Weight she hadn't realized she was carrying until it was gone. "Edmund can't appeal?" "He can try, but the judge's ruling is definitive. He has no grounds." Pembroke set down another document. "There's more. The judge was so unimpressed with Edmund's case that he's sanctioned him for frivolous litigation. Edmund has to pay your legal fees plus damages for business disruption. We're talking about nearly £20,000. He'll never pay that. He'll have to, or face criminal contempt charges." The judge was very clear. That evening, they gathered everyone, staff, tenants, investors, workers, the entire community, and announced the victory. The celebration was spontaneous and genuine, people hugging, crying, laughing with relief. "We did it," Thomas said, grabbing Eliza's hand. We actually did it. We beat him. We beat him together. No, you beat him. We just followed your lead. That's not... It is. You came here with nothing. We gave you a hard time. The whole world was against you, and you built something anyway. You're the reason we're all here, the reason we're thriving instead of scattered and desperate. Eliza felt tears threatening. I couldn't have done it without all of you. Maybe, but we couldn't have done it without you, so thank you for not giving up on us or this place. She didn't trust herself to speak, just nodded, squeezed his hand, moved on to the next person. That night, alone with Alistair in the study, she finally let herself process everything. It's really over, she said. The threat, the lawsuit, all of it. Until the next crisis. Always the optimist. Just realistic. Edmund might be defeated, but he's not the only challenge we'll face. Running an operation this size means constant problems. I know. But tonight, I'm going to enjoy the victory. You deserve it. You deserve all of this. He gestured at the manor, the land, the operation they'd built. You turned exile into triumph. We turned it into something better than either of us expected. Can I ask you something? Always. When you think about the future now, our future, what do you see? Eliza considered carefully. I see us continuing to build, expanding operations, helping more people, creating something that lasts beyond us. I see us figuring out this marriage day by day, making it real instead of just legal. I see... She paused. I see home. Here. Together. That's all I wanted to hear. She moved closer, took his hand. I'm not in love with you, not yet, but I think I'm getting there. Is that enough? More than enough. Then let's keep trying, keep building, see where this goes. Winter came, but it wasn't like that first brutal winter. The manor was warm, well supplied, comfortable. The tenant families were secure. The operation ran smoothly, even through bad weather. They'd built something resilient, something that could weather storms both literal and metaphorical. On Christmas Eve, Eliza stood at her bedroom window, the same window where she'd stood 4 years earlier, terrified and abandoned. The view was the same, moors stretching to darkness, sky pressing down, wind howling. But everything else had changed. The manor glowed with light and warmth. The fields were productive. The cottages were solid. Over 150 people depended on this place, and it supported them all. She'd done that. They'd done that. Together. A knock on her door. Alistair carrying 2 glasses of wine. Thought you might want company, he said. I do. They stood together at the window, looking out at their kingdom. I got you something, Alistair said, pulling out a small box. For Christmas. Inside was a ring, not elaborate or expensive, just simple gold with a small ruby. It's not much, he said, but I wanted you to have something that represents this. Our actual marriage, not the legal arrangement we started with. Eliza looked at the ring, then at him. 4 years ago, he'd put a wedding band on her finger and sent her away. Now he was offering her a different ring, a different promise. Are you asking me to marry you again? She asked. I'm asking if you'll accept a real marriage, a real partnership. Not because your family needs saving or because I need a legal wife, but because we choose each other, freely, honestly. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. The cruelty, the survival, the slow building of trust. The person she'd become and the person he was becoming. The life they'd built and the future they could have. Yes, she said. I accept. He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. I love you, he said again. I know you're not there yet, but I needed you to know. I'm getting there. Ask me in another year. I will. They stood at that window long into the night, watching snow begin to fall over Thornfield. Not the cruel killing snow of desperation, but the gentle snow of winter in a place that had learned to thrive through any season. 4 years ago, Eliza Harrow had been forced into a marriage and exiled to a dying estate, stripped of everything except the choice to survive or surrender. She'd chosen survival. And survival had become strength. Strength had become power. And power had become something she'd never expected. Home. Not the home she'd imagined, safe and simple and given to her, but the home she'd built, harsh and beautiful, and earned through blood and sweat and refusal to break. The abandoned duchess had become more powerful than the duke who'd exiled her, not through revenge or conquest, but through the simple radical act of building something better than either of them had imagined possible. And now they stood together, equals finally, looking at the empire they'd created from ruins. "What do you want to do next?" Alistair asked. Eliza smiled, fierce and certain. "Everything. We've proven we can survive anything. Now let's see what we can build when we're not just fighting to stay alive." "Everything," he echoed. "Together. Together." Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the moors in clean white. Inside, the fire burned warm, the wine tasted sweet, and the future stretched ahead full of possibility and promise, and the kind of hope that comes from knowing you've already survived the worst and come out stronger. 3 years of exile had forged Eliza into someone unbreakable. The next 3 years of partnership had shown her that strength didn't mean being alone. It meant choosing who to trust and building something worth protecting. And what they'd built was worth everything. The story that began with a cold marriage and exile ended with partnership and empire. Not perfect, because nothing built by human hands ever is, but real, substantial, lasting. Proof that courage, intelligence, and hard-won love could rewrite even the cruelest fate. Proof that the woman thrown away could become the woman who changed everything.